Is Star Citizen neglecting one of the most important aspects of its development? As a project that has become so big and complex, it's hard to know exactly when things are going to be released or why certain aspects are being prioritized over others. And with the somewhat open development process for the game, feature prioritization has been one of the more debated topics among fans. Everyone wants the things that are most important to them to be finished and added to the game as quickly as possible. Whether you want more mining, delivery, multi-crew, cargo hauling, bounty hunting, PvP events, base building, data running, or any of the other activities to be added and refined to the game, there's only so much that the dev team can do at once. And for anyone not familiar with the complexities and debates about Star Citizen's development, well, the Cliff Notes version is that there is a massive team of over 700 active developers working on Star Citizen, yet the project is somewhat divided, with the single-player standalone experience, aka Squadron 42, getting the majority of the development focus right now, and the multiplayer persistent universe, aka the PU, getting less attention. The single-player design in progress is also more closed off, so the bulk of the work being done with it is difficult to grasp for players who are ultimately funding the game largely for the multiplayer experience. And in addition to that, due to the ship selling revenue model for the game, there's also a lot of ships designed and released into the universe that still don't have a lot of functionality or purpose. So instead of building the game from the bottom up, it's kind of become a weird hybrid of bottom up and top down design, which has inevitably led to a lot of redesign as they figure out how the game should ultimately function. And as a fan of the project, it's been a lot of fun to watch the development process, but the roller coaster of setbacks or shifting focus away from areas that I care about has been difficult to stomach at times. For example, right now I'm patiently awaiting the next major patch to roll out, which will bring all these cool new features that may usher in the next era of Star Citizen's multiplayer universe. Yet so much of what's currently already in the verse is buggy, broken, or scheduled for a complete overhaul, and that can make playing in the current persistent universe a very frustrating experience and certainly uninviting for new players. Now, on one hand, the game is in an alpha, so signing up to play an alpha goes hand in hand with having an extremely buggy, unreliable experience. On the other hand, though, the persistent universe is so close to being a fun sandbox that can start appealing to a larger group of gamers that it feels like it's worth making that push to get the PU to a more playable state as soon as possible. A vertical slice of the persistent universe, if you will. In gaming development terminology, a vertical slice is a section of a game built as far to completion as possible before the rest of the project for the purpose of testing gameplay and figuring out challenges and hurdles to speed up the rest of the development process. Stanton, the single system currently in Star Citizen, is kind of that, but it's also extremely far from being able to replicate bigger gameplay loops and player interactions that it's not really serving the much bigger purpose that it could be about learning what is and isn't fun with the bigger gameplay loops. Now, of course, the developers are learning a lot from Stanton and the persistent universe, but still, it seems like pretty much every element of gameplay balance is so far from completion that there isn't much else we can learn about what does and doesn't work within Star Citizen, leaving the game in still a very much theoretical experience. I constantly find myself deep in conversation with other fans, talking about what the game will be like once features and gameplay loops are finally implemented or driven to their complete state. So far, my biggest takeaway from my time in Stanton is that Star Citizen is fun to explore. The game is beautiful, and flying and landing massive spaceships is really fun and immersive. And that in itself is worth a lot, as it shows the scope, freedom, and beauty of the game will be a major attractor for gamers. But as many gamers know, what makes a good game is beneath the surface. The meta, the gameplay loops, the learning curve, the narrative, the depth, and the co-op and PvP interactions. Those things will ultimately determine whether or not Star Citizen is actually a fun experience that appeals to a larger group of gamers. And in my opinion, CIG should be trying to figure out the core gameplay loops as quickly as possible. The sooner they can complete the design on these loops and figure out what's fun about them, the better they can design the rest of the game. This would ultimately benefit the workflow for everything from ship design, station design, location design, mission design, trading and selling design, and everything else that feeds off of those core elements. In my opinion, flight design, combat design, and mission running of the basics like bounty missions, mercenary missions, trading, and cargo delivery should all be pushed to their furthest tiers as quickly as possible. I believe these will be the most popular gameplay loops for the biggest group of players, so figuring out what works and doesn't as quickly as possible is really going to lay the foundation for the building blocks on how to design the rest of the game. Unfortunately though, the experiences in Stanton largely consist of broken box missions, ancient bunker missions, and bounty combat with the same old enemy ships and lack of tactics. And while some of the newer missions that have been added atop the existing mission trees are a little more interesting, the old underlying base missions, the bread and butter of what most players are doing day to day, are collecting dust and cobwebs. The 3 Bs, bunkers, bounties, and box missions are buggy, broken, and boring. They are in need of a lot of love. And frankly, they need to be pushed further to figure out just how interesting they can be so that Star Citizen can try to avoid the grindy gameplay that it seems in danger of falling into. And while the game doesn't really have enough of the underlying tech ready to push all of this stuff to its furthest level, I think enough of the tech is in the game to start pushing and experimenting quite substantially. Stanton really is the test bed for Star Citizen, but it seems like it's being used more for tech demonstrations and not enough for pushing gameplay loops to see what does and doesn't work. Even the event missions are getting a bit stale. Jumptown was a cool experience to begin with, but the actual event design has evolved so little since the first implementation that it leaves me scratching my head as to why the persistent universe isn't being pushed farther and faster. Even without things like server meshing in multi-system environments, there seems like there's so much more that they could be doing in Stanton in the meantime. Now, I do know that the mission teams are largely focused on Squadron 42's campaign right now, but there is a growing and active player base in the persistent universe waiting and willing to test out pretty much every new interaction of the game. And the more that's learned as soon as possible, the more the longer-term work can be designed with that knowledge in mind. There's certainly an argument to be made that it makes more sense to focus purely on the underlying tech versus polishing or building upon what's currently in the game, but I would argue that what the developers learn about pushing and polishing the current system tech is going to save them more time in the long run. If entire systems and features are being designed around untested theoretical gameplay loops, chances are there's going to be a lot of mistakes made, causing more and more delays while trying to reach a feature-complete, balanced product. The more that Stanton can be used to refine gameplay now, the less mistakes will be replicated on future systems and features. Ship tractor beams, finalizing landing processes, boarding other ships and piracy, ship combat balance, all of these things will dictate the future design based on how they work in their final implementation. It may turn out that the very first implementation of ship boarding invalidates a huge portion of the way that ships are currently designed. We simply won't know until the gameplay is actually built out, and the sooner it can be tested, the better for the development process. Vertical gameplay slices have a very important function in game development, and while doing a vertical slice in Star Citizen is not exactly straightforward, it seems like it could be the best step forward and also make the current persistent universe just more fun and inviting for players. Star Citizen feels like it's on the verge of exploding in popularity. The persistent universe is such a cool and impressive space. Players want to explore it more, and it seems like a heavy focus right now could lead to more time saved in the long run, better adoption rates, more favorable content being made about the project, and just generally a more happy player base. Now, of course, the extremely obscure development process of Star Citizen is not lost on me. This project is weird. It's an alpha that's a long ways off from a feature-complete project, with a fairly active player base wanting the alpha to be, well, more fun, more balanced, more feature-complete. And I think actually catering to the fun factor right now might actually be the fastest way forward for development. Again, what's learned from players having fun or not having fun will dictate how the rest of the game should be built. Then again, perhaps this is just what I want from the game, and it might not represent the general interest from the community, but what do you guys think? For those of you that have played or currently play Star Citizen, do you want a bigger emphasis on working on the persistent universe, a bigger emphasis on Squadron 42, or a bigger emphasis on the underlying fundamentals so that they can really start to just build out the finalized systems on top of that? And of course, at the end of the day, I'm just a fan and I really don't have a comprehensive understanding of what the underlying tech and the management process and the division of labor between the teams is really like. I can just speak to as what I want to see in the game sooner rather than later. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on this subject, and as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.